My name is Matt Ware. I am a freelance Android developer. Just currently doing a bunch of different projects right now and loving it. So I've been doing Android for about 5 years, and I've never been into design really. So I've just recently got into design, and I'm super excited to kind of share what I've been learning. So I guess we should jump in here. Is everyone here a developer, or is anyone a designer, would you say? Awesome. Do you use Sketch? I do. You do? All right, great. So Sketch 3, if you don't know, is a design tool from Bohemian Coders that is kind of sweeping the industry right now. It's a screen design tool, so it's basically just for static screens and final assets or mock-ups. It's not interaction design, so it doesn't do motion like Pixate, and it's very geared towards screen design. So, you know, it's not, if you need to manipulate a photo to make it, to airbrush it or something, it's not going to be as good as Photoshop, but it's going to be 1,000 times better at designing an app than Photoshop is, in my opinion, and a lot cheaper. So, why talk about Sketch at all? And I think that this quote from Roman Nurek really kind of sums it up of why I think this is an important topic. And that's designer as chief curator. And I think this is the way we're seeing teams work more and more, that everyone is kind of bringing ideas together, and the designer is the guardrails and make sure, you know, what is getting put out there is really cohesive and solves the problem. On a lot of agile teams, I think most people would say they're doing agile. I noticed that the designer is still kind of, he's not embedded or included as much as they should be. She's oftentimes kind of given the problem, and maybe there's a design meeting where everyone comes together and reviews the mocks, or maybe there's not. Maybe everyone just kind of comes together and the designs get handed to you after the spec goes to the designer. And the problem with that is maybe it's good up front, and in the design meeting everyone thinks, oh, this looks great, you know, we can do this right away. But then once you actually start programming it, you realize this is maybe a little impossible. And so you have to go back to the designer and say, oh yeah, this was kind of messed up here, whatnot. Well, they've moved on to something else potentially, and the problem is not in their head anymore, and they've just got to solve it really quick and get it back to you so they can continue working on their thing. And usually the problem doesn't get solved in the cohesive way that it was solved the first time. And designer as curator puts the responsibility to design on everyone. So everyone understands the design problem. Everyone can actually contribute mocks and contribute assets. And I've kind of seen that designers that are embedded in development teams where developers are also contributing, the end product is much more rich. Designers, unfortunately, in the Android world, you've probably noticed if you have an Android-specific designer, I think you're kind of in the fortunate minority. But most of us, our designers carry iPhones. They aren't familiar with the coolest Android apps and the interactions within those apps. And it's up to us to really advocate for Android and make sure we don't just have a port from the iOS app or something that looks more like a website or whatnot. So designer is chief curator. I think it's a really important concept. I heard Roman Nurek say it recently, and I think that's why we should care about tools like Sketch, where we can actually contribute more. Also, you know, if you want to build an app on your own, it's very hard without a designer, and maybe this will empower you a little bit more. So let's jump in here. So if you only pay attention for the next 5 minutes, I say pay attention, or if you're only gonna, like, if you got 5 minutes to pay attention to this talk, pay attention for the next 5 minutes, and you might have enough to actually be dangerous in Sketch. So what we're gonna do is just kind of get Sketch up and running and open an Android template where we can just drag and drop Android components and actually create something. So the first thing you're gonna need to do, oh, magic move, is install Roboto. Roboto is the font Android uses. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. Nodo if it's a non-Roboto script, but I like to get it from here, just google.com/fonts. It gives you the option to put in all the different styles and weights that you want, and it'll download a zip, which will be a bunch of TTF files, which is a font file, and you'll just go into the font installer for the Mac. Sketch is only for Mac, so if you have a Windows machine, I'm sorry, for more reasons than just that, but you can install your fonts here, and then you'll open Sketch, you'll go to File, New from Template, and just built in, straight from Sketch, you can select Material Design Template, and you'll get this really cool artboard sheet here. It's basically just a page, and it'll have just everything to spec. The typography, the system icons, the metrics, the key lines, default themes, components, global elements like system icons and dialogues, just all kinds of great things that you can just easily select from right here and paste right into your artboard. What I like to do is, and we're going to go into all this a little more depth, but I like to select, create a new page from my sticker sheet, and then create an artboard, which is just basically a screen. And built-in material design has, mobile portrait, mobile landscape, tablets, 7-inch tablets, 9-inch. You just select one of these. You can even build a website in Material, or an iOS app if you really want to troll your counterparts, and just create an artboard. And so you'll just have this on your canvas here. You can go back to your sticker sheet, select something. I've selected a screen here, paste it in, bam, you got an app. You could export it and go to town, make $1 million off of your cool app. Probably not, but you can kind of get the picture here. Super easy just to get started. So if you want to download Sketch, it's $99. Search for a promo code first. You probably save 20%, and you can get going here. It's very cool. But in order to build something really engaging, something that really stands out on the Android platform or fits cohesively within the system, you're going to need to understand Material extremely well. And what parts of Material are you going to need to understand for Sketch? Not as much of the motion, although it's important for developing a great app. You will need to understand the colors and the typography and just basically everything that's going to be on a static screen very well. So the first topic that is going to be really important when you're going to start a design is going to be what colors you're going to use. So the spec says that you need to use bold hues juxtaposed with muted environments, deep shadows, bright highlights. And what that comes down to is you'll have a bunch of different colors. So you'll open up all the color palettes. This is indigo here with a pink accent. And you'll want to pick three main colors from the palette, from the main palette, and you'll want to pick one color from an accent palette. And what I like to do is just, I'm sorry? Thought there was a question. But what I like to do is just try to get a feel for what kind of app I'm making. Is it serious? Is it more playful? If it's more playful, I'll probably use a brighter color. If it's more serious or the content really shines out, I'll probably use a more muted color. But a bold color on a muted environment. Pick three colors and just play around with which colors you pick. Typography is very important in the color that you pick on your typography. The spec lays this out very clearly. If it's light text, if it's a light background, you want to pick a darker text. If it's a dark background, you pick a lighter text. If it's emphasized, you don't want to put any transparency on the text. If it is just kind of like a subtitle or something, you might want to put a little transparency on the text. Imagery. So imagery is obviously very important. It's a powerful tool to help you communicate and differentiate your product. You want to use bold graphics. Intentional imagery helps to engage a user. Apps that have a bunch of images in them, you want to use them more, So, you want to be very intentional with what kind of images you choose. And you want to choose ones that are contextual to your experience. If you have a travel app, you you want to show pictures of your actual destination city if you're showing like a plane ride or whatnot. If you're showing user information, try to show a picture of that actual user instead of just like a random person, you know. That seems contrived, but just you can always kind of think contextually, what kind of images can I show here? What can I not? And there's a lot of rules around images and material design. You can use multiple mediums. So if you don't have a bunch of actual photography, it's okay to mix in artwork and drawings. So if you've got a profile picture, you don't have to just use a picture of that person. If you don't have it, it's okay to mix it and show a drawing of the person. So, but just really contextual to your experience, immersive. You know, if it's a big hero image, have it bleed all the way to the edge and things like that. So, you can really humanize an app by the imagery that's in it. In typography is just such a huge topic, so it's really hard to go over everything right now, but you just know the fonts that you want to use. Generally it's going to be Roboto, Noto, because you get those for free and you don't have to get licenses for them. They match on the system. They're optimized for the system, so they'll be able to render them the fastest and whatnot. But just make sure to use that and kind of look over the typography spec and learn a little bit about what you're doing. So, all right, here's the meat. Who's ready? I can just sense it in this room, just like everyone. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Sketch. Sketch is made by Bohemian Coders, like I said, Sketch 3. It came out a few years ago. It just won the Apple Design Award, and it's just a great tool for screen design. So we'll just jump right in. As you can see, when you open up Sketch, this is what you'll see. This is a blank document right here. What's one of the first things I notice is it's not a cockpit. There's not a million things like when you open Photoshop. Photoshop, I've probably tried to learn about 3,000 times, and I fail every single time because I'm just like, I need to copy and paste this, and I look up a tutorial. I'm like, why do I even have to look up a tutorial? It's copy and paste, and then 30 minutes later, I just like have flipped my table over and poured gasoline on my computer, and I just have given up. So, it's a tough crowd. No, it's just terrible jokes. The top menu here is what you'll see. It's not a lot of tools, but here's the toolbar. We'll go over all these tools here in a minute. In the middle, you have this infinite canvas. It goes out infinitely, so if you ever lose your document or what you're working on, you can hit Command 1, or even better, you can go to the View menu and hit Center Canvas. Actually, that's not better. Use the key command. On the left here, you have your layer list. This will help keep your document organized as you add shapes and group them together and ungroup them, whatnot. And on the right, you have your inspector. And depending on what type of layer you have selected, you'll have different attributes that you can edit. And I gotta say, it's extremely powerful in Sketch. Even though you don't have as many options or abilities in Photoshop, the inspector to adjust colors and everything is quite powerful. So you pretty much have everything you need. I've never met a designer who's using Sketch in their day-to-day for app design that can't do something that they used to be able to do in Photoshop. They're usually doing it much faster, and especially with some of the integrations I'm going to talk about later, much more productive. And the developers can be involved. So just to go over the toolbar overview here, in the top left, you have your insert menu. And these are going to be your objects that you generally place on the canvas. When you look at any app, and I don't know why this eluded me for so long, or any software really, it's just a bunch of rectangles, and that's what you'll be using a lot. They're just styled rectangles. They have images on them and gradients and whatnot. So you'll come here to this menu, you'll pick a shape, and you'll pick a rectangle and draw whatnot, or an oval, or other shapes. Sometimes you have other shapes and whatnot, but overall, you have a vector, which will be, you can draw kind of anything you want and make the line go any which way. You have a pencil, which if you have a Wacom or something, you could draw. I'm not talented enough to draw, but I can make an app, kinda. Text, obviously, a bitmap, artboards, which I showed you earlier, are just basically canned screens that you can use. A slice to help export graphics, and a symbol, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and styled text. So here I drew a rectangle. You can kind of see what it would look like on the canvas. Kind of get you oriented to sketch a little bit. Group and ungroup. This will help you kind of keep everything organized. If you make, say, a toolbar at the top, and it's got a rectangle for the toolbar and icons for all the menu items and a home screen and whatnot, you might get unorganized. So you might want to select all those things and hit group, and then in your layer list, you'll just see one group that says toolbar, and you could drill down into it. Think of it kind of like a package in Java. Create symbol, extremely powerful tool. I like to think of this as kind of like creating an object, or creating a class in Java, where you can reuse it everywhere, and when you need to change something in it, its behavior, you can change it in one place and it happens everywhere. And we'll go into this a little bit deeper, but just know it's a way when you're exporting graphics that you can keep everything organized and kind of in sync. Zoom, obviously, like I said, if you get lost in the infinite canvas, the infinite abyss of your canvas, you can just quickly hit Command 1, get everything centered. These are kind of your standard tools here. You have an edit where you can move around your tools, or you transform it, as in skew it, rotate, and flatten. One kind of thing to keep in mind with transform, which is kind of a hole in Sketch, I feel like, but say you had a group of a rectangle and it had text on it, you can't actually transform a group. You can only transform individual shapes. I really wish that you could put text. I was trying to put like a cover flow album together one time, where you would have like an album in the middle and you would swipe it and it would kind of transform out, and I had text on it. I couldn't actually transform the text on top of the rectangle at the same time. I had to do them separately. I thought that was kind of annoying. So maybe that's a little hole in Sketch, but overall it's great. Here's a mask and scale. Mask is generally great if you want a bitmap to fit around a certain shape. So who's done graphics programming on Android? Oh, great. So you've probably used a mask by like clipping a shape together, clipping a path to a bitmap. Here are your Boolean operations. We're going to go into these a little more in depth later, but they are just extremely powerful for creating icons and whatnot, especially in material. You'll notice that icons are oftentimes very flat. That's the style. They're supposed to face forward. They're not supposed to have depth. Most of them are just made up with a bunch of polygons that you put together and you intersect and you union. And I know that seems kind of obvious, but to me it was like magic when I learned that, oh wow, this clock is just like 4 ovals and 4 rectangles and they're positioned together. So very cool. We'll go over that in a minute. Move things forward and backwards. So like this circle here is on top of the square. If I move the circle backwards, then it would the square would be covering the circle. Pretty standard stuff. And interacting with layers. So you can select a layer and it'll show its handles. You can resize by dragging a handle. You can use the arrow keys. I think this is pretty cool. You can use the arrow keys and move it. If you hit the left arrow to move it to the left by 1 pixel. If you hit the right key, it'll move it to the right by 1 pixel. If you hit shift and you hold the arrow key, it'll move it by 10 pixels, which is pretty nice. But embedded in that little statement there is something that's kind of cool. You get to design in pixels. You don't have to do any math. You just design an MDPI, and when you need to move something over a little bit, you just move it by a pixel, and everything gets scaled up when you export. And I'll show you how to do that here in a minute, but I think that's very nice. You can develop in a different density if you want. You could design an XX HDPI. You just have to do more math. I just like the pixels, and that's pretty cool, I think. So keep moving along here. Oh yeah, and if you need to actually move an object or a layer by a specific amount, that's kind of a strange amount. You don't have to use your mouse to drag it by that amount. You can actually put expressions in your inspector right here, like so I put plus 13 right here, and it moved it over to the right by 13. And if I needed to move it 13 also down, I could do that. That's really helpful for when you have two layers, you need to move them at the same amount, and you can put expressions in there. I think that's very cool. You can also duplicate a layer, which becomes very powerful, as we'll see when we're creating an icon here in a minute. You can hide and show a layer, as you see this little eyeball here. That's pretty helpful if you've got a very busy design and you need to focus on this one little piece here. You'll hide a bunch of layers. It's a pretty standard tool in most design tools, but I just kind of want to give an overview. And you can lock a layer. This is really important for background layers, is what I find, because you know, everything is going to be on top of the background layer. And when you start selecting around with your mouse, you'll oftentimes accidentally select your background layer and move it, and then it's in the wrong spot, and you have to Control Z and blah, blah, blah. So very important to lock the background layer or any layer that you don't want moved while you're moving stuff around. So just continuing with interacting with layers here. As you can see, I've grouped these two, this oval and this rectangle here, and it creates a folder on the layer list. It kind of keeps it organized. And here's my inspector. If I select a layer, I get all kinds of options. I can put an inner shadow, an outer shadow, a border, a fill. All the various join types can be edited here, which are kind of a complex way to say like how it's drawn together when you intersect our Boolean objects. And you can edit the colors by dragging. You can select a color with an eyedropper. Just the power of their inspector is really incredible for how cheap this tool is, and just that it's such a new tool. They've really got everything covered. A Gaussian blur. They don't have a lot of different filter types you can put on an object. So a filter type would be like, I filled this circle here with red, but I could do it like a Gaussian blur, and it would put a gradient in a certain way. It would kind of look fuzzy. Well, you can also put a texture on it, and there's not a lot of textures in Sketch. So if you needed like a special texture, you might actually have to use Photoshop in that way. They only have like very basic one. Boolean operations. So this is kind of what I was talking about, where when you need to develop something like an icon and how they're just polygons that you kind of put together. So you have union, which will just take two objects and put them together, and the left will win out, and they'll be the same color. You have subtract, which will take whatever is on top and erase that from what's ever on the bottom. There's an intersect. I think that one's pretty obvious, you know, if you remember set theory. And there's a difference, which it basically does the same thing as a union, but on the right. So actually, I might have said that wrong for difference, but here's something I made here with Boolean operations. Does anyone know what this is? Yes, it's a clock. I got it right. People knew. It's awesome. So yeah, like I said, this is just 4 circles and 4 rectangles. What I did was I just created an oval here. It's just filled it with black, removed the border. And then I made a copy of it. So I made a copy of that oval. It's same size right on top, and I went in the inspector and just resized it about 20 pixels down. So you can't see it because it's also filled here, but there's another circle in the middle it's black. And then I union them together. I select both ovals and I union them together, and it creates the outer rim. Then I made a copy of the big circle and scaled it down, moved it up to the right, made another copy, moved it over to the left. And I just moved my hands to the right and said to the left. That's awesome. And was able to union those together. And now I have what looks like a mouse. Made 2 rectangles on the bottom, union those together, and now I have my 2 legs. And then made 2 rectangles in the middle that are the same size. I resized the one on top, and then hit the rotate button, select it and hit the rotate button. And as you can see, there's a little target at the bottom of the hand, that'll show up right in the middle, actually, of the object. When you hit rotate, you can just drag it with your mouse all the way to the bottom and just type in 45 degrees or 15 degrees or whatever angle you want to rotate that, and then it'll rotate it at the new point instead of rotating it in the middle. Pretty cool. And you rotate it, you union it, change the radius, and you have an awesome alarm clock that you can export and put in your menu item for setting an alarm. And you can, the range of icons you can make with just simple polygons is incredible. And there's lots of great blog posts about how to do this, and it's a lot of fun. So I remember I told you earlier about creating symbols. Symbols are really important because oftentimes you'll have a symbol, like say this alarm clock was used on 5 different screens in my app. I could make a copy of it, and then I would have it in 5 different places. And then we could go to the design meeting, and the designer as chief curator would be like, Matt, I'm really impressed. I'm actually a little afraid I'm gonna lose my job here, but you made this great alarm clock, and it needs to be edited a little bit. Can you go edit all of them? So if I created a symbol by just clicking create symbol here, it'll turn this alarm clock in purple in my layer list. And that means I can insert this symbol anywhere else in my document. So let's say I did it right. I inserted this symbol in 5 different places. If I edit any one of those symbols, it will update all of them. It's very powerful. It's, that's why I say it's good object-oriented design in design. So very important. Mask, like I said, if you need to clip a bitmap to a shape, it's really handy. As we'll see here, here is our favorite designer at Google, Martís Duarte, in his awesome shirts that cost $300. I looked up because I wanted one, and I'm like, $300 is kind of expensive. So I'll just stick with Old Navy. So as you can see here in my layer list, I've got a bitmap on the back, Martís Duarte. Say that 8 times really fast. And I have a little rectangle in the front. And in my design, I only have the room for the rectangle for the bitmap. So what I need to do is select both of these, as I have done. You can see them highlighted in the layer list. And resize that bitmap. And as you can see, what you see, now that I've masked it, the bitmap of Martís Duarte is in the middle here. And that's actually the rectangle that I clipped to. And the bitmap is still kind of visible on the outside with the rectangle. And I can resize those corners, and you just kind of have to picture that there's a little window you're looking through to see the bitmap as you're moving it around. So just really powerful for like if you needed a profile picture in the shape of a circle, you would just draw an oval and put the bitmap behind it and then mask them, and then you can move it around and get it right in the face. Although when you go to develop it, the bitmap never looks right, and like the face is half cut off, and then you got to use the facial recognition, but then it's slow, and I'm just kidding. My jokes are great today. Let's see here. Text. So like I said, text is a huge subject, but I found 2 really helpful things with text. The first was, so I developed an app recently. It was a children's cartoon, and they had a very small budget, so I got to do the design. I got paid to do design for the first time in my life. I was ecstatic. And I came and I presented my design to their head designer because he didn't have time to do it. And he said, this is great, but your text is just all over the place. I had 10 different text sizes, and they were all different fonts and in weights and styles. And he's like, here's what I would do. And I'm an expert designer, so you should listen to me. Pick 3. Pick 3 styles and just see if you can make the whole design with that. And if you can't, if you need a 4th, that's fine. If you can only do it with 2, that's even better. But just having that idea, like every time I went to go make new text, I had a new style. So I'm just limiting it to 3. And then the other one is to create shared styles. And with shared styles, you basically have to think about it like styles in Android. If you know you're going to use a header style everywhere, you want to, when you create your text, go over to the inspector menu here and create a style. As you can see, I wrote header style for this style. And then when you're out developing something else, you can select the new text that you're doing and then come here in the inspector menu. And like I said, I've got footer text here as another style. It'll actually show you what it looks like in the inspector. And I choose header text style here, and I can reuse my styles. Really powerful. And one minor thing with text, when you insert text, you can do it as auto. And that means that when you type your text, it'll just keep going all the way out to the right. If you hit a new line, it'll come back this way, and you can type again. Or you can have it fixed length, and you just drag a rectangle, and as you type, it'll automatically do line breaks on the end. So if you know in your design, I only want this text to take up 200 dips or 200 pixels, then you will just make it fixed. Exporting. Exporting is my favorite topic. I don't know why. Maybe because I always had to ask people to export for me, and they would take a long time, and I would just have to go surf the internet. I had no other choice. So I guess I had other choices. But. Exporting is a big topic. So we'll just start with slices. And you'll see this little knife here in your layer list. And if that's highlighted, you can see all of your slices in your layer list. I don't have any slices right now, so we don't see any. But you want to make sure that's highlighted if you want to be able to see them. So to insert a slice, you'll just come here to your insert menu, and you'll select slice. And that will give you a little rectangle that you can drag around, and you just kind of get it perfect on what you want to slice. And once you drop it, that'll create a slice. But what you'll notice here is, I've got this purple background. I don't want to export the purple background. I just want the icon because it's awesome. So I need to select this export group contents only. But the problem with that is I haven't organized my document and my layer list in such a way where I can easily move, where that is actually a layer separate from my background with which I can only export that group's context. So I just need to reorganize my layers over here on the left. As you can see, I put the background rectangle outside of my group of icons. And then I can select this export group contents only. And as you see, the preview shows that there's no purple background that's being exported. So like I said, here's the actual children's cartoon that I did app. And the first episode is free, and then you scroll down, and the other ones are $1.99. And I designed this whole thing. I presented it. It got accepted. Great. All right, now I get to develop it, and I need to export these graphics. So I searched around on the web to kind of come up with a good strategy to export designs, mostly so I could present it here, but also just because I want to be a good designer. And I came up with this strategy from reading various blog posts that what a lot of people like to do is they like to create a new page called exports. You see my pages here in my layer list. So I create a page called exports, and then I add an artboard to it that's a big artboard. So I put an A4 size, and I renamed it to Res. So whatever your artboard name is when you export, it'll put them in that folder. So I put Res because that's what's going to be in Android Studio. And I created symbols for my play button and my disable play button because those are used everywhere. And when I update them, I want them to update everywhere. And I created a bunch of slices for all the other graphics, for the logo, for all of my episodes, for my background. And I select all those just by hitting Shift and clicking on all my layers. And then I can go down. You see there's an export menu available on the bottom right now. And all I do is I just go down here, and so this tool, if there's anything that's wrong with it, it's a little more geared to iOS. You have this mirror option here up in the toolbar that I didn't discuss about, but that's to mirror your design on an iOS device. So, I spite that icon every time I look at it, but anyways. And I love iOS, actually. I used an iPhone once, but then I had to go back to Android right away. And so I have an export menu here, and what I'm saying is I want to export all these graphics at 1x size, and I want to append, put a suffix on the end of MDPI for that file. And then I want one that's 1.5, which is HDPI, so the file needs to be named HDPI. and a 2x and a 3x with the corresponding density. And then I just hit export, and it puts all those files in one folder. So I've got 4 of each one of my files that I exported, which isn't great for Android Studio, right? Because you need them named a certain way. So I have this quick shell script here that I just paste to wherever I put it, in this case the desktop. I switch directory to the desktop, and I just go through and I name all the XXHDPIs and put them in a drawable.xxhdpi folder, and the same with all the other densities. And then I just have one res folder with all of my density folders. I drop it right into Android Studio, and bam, I'm ready to develop. I got this idea from this link here at the bottom of the slide. But there's actually an even better way to do this. And everyone who is using Sketch in their design process should absolutely be using this, because it's awesome. And that is, unless you don't want to, that is Zeppelin. Zeppelin is a tool to help designers and developers collaborate. It's amazing. So you can download it. It's a Sketch plugin. And so when you go to export, instead of doing the whole menu like I did earlier, all you do is come up here to plugins and hit export selected artboards. And then you'll open up Zeppelin. It has a web interface if someone doesn't have a Mac, but this is the Mac app. And you can see all the artboards that you've exported for this project. So I'll jump in here to the res artboard, and you can put comments. So I put a comment here. Make sure to put this without a margin. So your designer could do that. If you didn't understand, you could respond. It'll give you a notification. You can respond. It's a great way to collaborate. But you can see all of your assets here. You can see the colors that are involved and whatnot. Probably the most powerful feature I've found is you can see the exported screen, and you can just kind of hover around with your mouse, and you can see exactly how many dips each piece is apart from each other. I have been grown so weary of like contacting designers to make sure I've got the right spacing and whatnot. And obviously, a lot of times I just kind of eyeball it. But this is amazing. The designer is an expert at what they're doing. They're getting paid a lot of money on your team. They're a crucial aspect. And they know how much they want things spaced. And now you can just easily come here to Zeppelin and kind of hover around and see how much space is between everything, how big icons are and whatnot. You can just click on the Assets tab, and it'll automatically let you download all of the exported assets for every DPI and put them straight into Android Studio. This tool is just so powerful. I highly recommend it. Just kind of an overview of what we did today. We talked about what Sketch is. We did a quick and dirty how to get into Sketch and do a material template and pull things into an artboard and kind of have something that's kind of working. And then we went into a deep dive of all the features of Sketch and how to navigate it and what to do with those quick and dirty pieces you pulled in, and then how to export it and get it into Android Studio so that you can create a great app or contribute in a design meeting. So I really appreciate everyone listening today, and I hope that if you have any questions, contact me on Twitter. I'm Parallel Cross, or there's my email. And hopefully you will have gained a little more interest in Sketch, and maybe it'll help you one day in communicating with your designers. So appreciate it. Are there any questions? Yes.
I've used Sketch for about 15 minutes. So when you like drag it around, it has kind of suggestions for where you can anchor certain things.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions? Because I feel like a lot of times it doesn't anchor to the object that I want it to anchor to.
Right.
Do you know any tips for that?
Yeah, so the question was, like, when you're dragging around something in Sketch, how about I open Sketch here, and we'll just do it. So I've opened Sketch. So the question was basically like, say I've created a rectangle, and say I've created an oval just by hitting O and X. And like I need to like organize these so they're lined up. And you can see there's guidelines as you like move stuff around. So you can see how like sometimes it can be hard with the mouse because the mouse isn't super precise. So one thing you can do is select multiple objects, And you have this little menu up here. Oh, gotta hit shift. In the right, that'll help you kind of align things. So these will both align them to the left side, the middle, to the right. The tops are aligned and stuff like that. So, and obviously you can look at the inspector too and see, okay, this one is 286 high, and I need it to be 290, so plus 4. And then you can make this one 290 also. Now they're the same size, but they're not necessarily lined up, so you want to select it here and line their tops, and they're the same. So pretty cool. And of course, the questioner said they've only played with it for 15 minutes. It's a very intuitive tool, and you run into that little things like that all the time, and it's pretty easy to figure out. So yes. I haven't gone too deep. So the question was, what other plugins besides Zeppelin do I use? I haven't gone too deep into other plugins, but the plugins around Sketch are numerous. I mean, there are so many that you can use. And like it's built in. See, if you come file here, new from template, you can pick material design, iOS, web and all that. And you can actually export all your styles built in to CSS, but there's tons of other plugins too that you could use. Then that's built in, but there's other plugins. So. Anyone else? Yes.
So I've used it a little bit, and one of the things that I've struggled with is trying to understand or figure out how I should lay out artboards and whether I should do multiple artboards.
Yeah.
What is the flow you use for that? How do you work around that?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a good one or not. But one thing that I like to do is just kind of, it's like you're reading a book. What happens first is top left corner, and then as it happens, it goes bottom down right, and that's how I organize it. But I don't know. There's probably better strategies. That's a good question. But the question was, how do you organize your artboards? And that's my strategy, just like reading a book, top to left. So like, say the first screen is it's a master detail. And there's a list on the first screen, I would put my detail to the right of it. And then if you scroll down to that, it might go down one on that level. But I don't have a good strategy, honestly.
That part where I had struggle is doing different states. And then like the tree that it becomes if I have to go through different states in the same screen and figuring out what the best way is to show that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, sir?
Do you use a different artboard for each screen? Like if you go for the master, like the list detail, do you use a different artboard for that?
Yes. So the question was, do you use different artboards for different screens? And that's exactly what I do. So I'll like insert an artboard. You can actually just click on the canvas and hit A. And so I'll put a portrait here, and let's say this one's, and I can rename it here in the menu, some master. I can either just copy it here with Control Paste, and it'll move one over. Or I could just click on the canvas again and hit A, and then pick another one, and it'll put it there. And I could rename this one Detail. So, and then paste whatever I want there and whatnot. So, I am not a designer at all. So this is really a powerful tool to be able to get in here really quickly. Yes, sir.
I came in halfway.
Are you a designer? I apologize. He said yes.
So, is this a good tool that, just getting my feet wet in even learning code or anything like that? So I come from the opposite end of where you come from, more design, learning coding and
Oh, awesome. That's great, man. That's really cool that you're doing that.
It's all right. It's really overwhelming. Is this something that would be easier to use in workflow than something like Illustrator or Photoshop?
Yeah. So the question was, is it easier to use than Photoshop or Illustrator? And I think for screen design, it's way easier. But that's just from personal experience of trying to learn Illustrator and trying to learn Photoshop and failing miserably every time. So I was able to pick this tool up in an afternoon, where Photoshop and Illustrator I've tried dozens of times to do simple things, and I fail miserably. So I think it meets the use case a lot better of like designing a screen than Photoshop. I think if you're gonna like brush up, skin or something, then it might be a lot harder than Photoshop. Or if you're gonna make a really intricate design, maybe not as good as Illustrator, but so. Is that all the questions, or? When you ask it that way, it's kind of like, all right, are you all done yet? But, all right. Well, I really appreciate y'all listening to the talk, especially since there are other great talks going on right now. But y'all have a good day. Thanks.